Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to the program. This is Daily Politics on Trust TV. I'm Abdullahi Ahmed. Tonight, we examine the shifting political tides as Nigeria inches towards the 2027 general elections, from gale of defections to covert alliances, including the latest dismissal by the PDP National Assembly caucus of a reported power-sharing pact between former Vice President Atiku Abubakar and the Labour Party's Peter Obi. We also spotlight this week's Daily Trust exclusive headline, which lays bare the political horse trading and quiet backdoor negotiations enabling desperate quote-unquote politicians to switch allegiances to the ruling party, often without regard to the electorate's expectations. To help us navigate and unpack these high-stakes developments, we're joined by Clement Oloyede. He is the politics editor of Media Trust Group for some expert insight as well as analysis on some of these major developments. Mr. Clement, as always, a pleasure. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It looks like the political atmosphere is not going to slow down anytime soon, even though 2027 seems a little far away. This week, we are understanding a lot more about what may be shaping some of these defections that we've seen over the past couple of weeks. Help me situate it in understanding why this carrot and stick approach appears to be the reasonable explanation as to why we're seeing even unlikely certain political figures, join the APC at this moment.
Yeah, once again, thank you for having me and Nigerians viewers. It's been a very, very long week politically. It's been like that from the beginning of the year. To answer your question on why we're having this, I think I will use the words of the APC National Director of Publicity, who we spoke to when we were working on the story. And he summarily said, all the defection you're saying, they're just about personal survivor. And I would like to add personal aggrandizement. Nigerian nature of politics have always been about personality and about personal goals, neglecting collective or society goals most of the times. And what we've seen in the past few weeks with the defections that have been happening, like I said earlier, is about personal goals, ways of keeping themselves in power, regardless of what their supporters or what the people that voted them into office thinks of their decision. And in the past few weeks, we've seen with the defection in Delta, with defection in Kebbi, the one in Kano, and we've seen that it's the same pattern. Perhaps the one that surprised most people were the one from Delta. But if you read behind the lines, and even from the conversations that some of these politicians have been saying, it's about self. It's about self. Of course, they make self look like a collective thing when they say, okay, we're doing it not for ourselves, but for the people. But over time, you understand that it's just about keeping themselves in office, keeping themselves in the corridor of power where they can continue to protect whatever they have gathered, whatever they legitimately or illegitimately have gathered over time. But what happened in Kebbi to observers is not really that much strange, because if you look back to 2022, 2023, the run up to the 2023 election, two of these three senators, I'm talking of former Governor Aliero and the former leader of the Senate, Abdullahi Ahmed, they were both in the APC. They've been in the APC for a very long time, but they had to leave towards the election, and it was because of internal crisis in the Kebbi chapter of the APC. The allegations at that time were that from the Aliero and Abdullahi Ahmed group was that the then governor, who is the current Minister of Budget and National Planning, Atiku Abubakar, is not giving them, is not allowing them open field to play. And so then it was, when they were leaving APC for PDP, it was for personal goals. It was about survival, because they feared then that they probably would not get the ticket of the APC. So they went to the PDP, got it. And now that they won the election, they feel, Nigerian politicians always feel the urge to connect to the power at the federal. And with what we've seen from the president, the same scenario applies with the Kano incident. I'm talking of Kano, Senator Abdurrahman Sumaila. He was also in APC. He left because of disagreement at the state chapter, and he's back now. So,
Go ahead.
So I was going to say, for the politicians, for those defecting, is a common thing, But for those that wooing them, some will say influencing them, the presidency, the APC, is about 2027 election. Is about not taking chances. We saw the results of the election in 2023. It was the closest we've ever had in the history of the Fourth Republic. So, and with the development in the economy since 2023, when the subsidy was removed and what have you, the APC knows that even with the opposition with their legs shaking, it's still not a given that they're going to win the election, because if by any sheer luck the oppositions are able to close ranks before the election, it becomes very difficult for them.
Right. Before we talk about the opposition, which I think is also going to be a part of the analysis this evening, let's talk about what the reporting on Daily Trust also suggests is the carrot that is being used. Yeah. I mean, especially in the case of Kawu Samaila, for instance, he has had to come out and, try to clear the air about rumored contracts that may have influenced his decision to jump the ship from NNPP to APC. What more can you tell us about how some of these things might necessarily have incentivized some of these political figures to join the APC?
Yeah, the Kawu Samaila interview, when we spoke with him, when we had the interview, he was very frank, he was open, at least open for the status of a Nigerian politician, because they have not really been known to be straightforward with information. So he came open. In fact, we were not certain of the figure. We were thinking, because some of the figures that have been bandied around were around 60 billion or so. It was one that told us that it was around 96 billion. And he confirmed to us that these contracts were negotiated, or to use his word, were influenced by him long before the issue of defection came on board. Of course, if there's a popular saying in African culture that if you want to step on a wet ground, you pour water ahead. Right. So even if the presidency had approved the contract long before even conversation about project comes about, it's commonsensical to think that this is the presidency or this is the APC-led government wetting the ground for things to come. Kawu Samaila confirmed that these projects have been approved. He said the money was from the ecological funds and that it has been approved, because we asked him whether this was part of the 2025 budget, and he said no, it was from the ecological fund, and we know that there's a very large bucket to take from. And he said the project has even started. And he further confirmed to us, towards the tail end of the interview, if you were right through, that it's not only that. When they concluded that they were going to defect, they started having some conversation with the presidency, with the leadership of the APC, that, okay, we have agreed to defect now. Outside this 96 billion, which is not part of the discussion before, outside this 96 billion, we need this, and that. And he said it were granted. One of it he mentioned was the Federal Medical Center that is going to be established, I think, in Rano, which is also part of Kano South. I think some other projects, here and there, were also agreed. I think in the coming days we may get to know details more, because like today there was a report by Budget that about 11,000 words insertion were. Right. So I think by the time journalists and data researchers start sieving through the budget document, they will start being able to tie some of these projects to some of the defectors. Right. And you'll be able to know that, okay, perhaps these were some of the things that were probably offered to them to influence their decision, or offered to them ahead of time to soften in anticipation of their defection.
And do you understand whether this is going to become a trend, just as you alluded to right now? Because we hear the governor of Delta State, prior to his defection, allude to an alignment with the center, and obviously talking about bringing all the goodies to Delta State. The governor of Akwa Ibom, whose defection is also anticipated, it has also echoed those same sentiments. While we're trying to understand some of those rhetorics, there is also another conversation about whether the EFCC is being used to force these people to join the APC. But now we're seeing a different tide unfold dramatically. Looking at the groundswell of not only support, but size of the APC in both chambers of the National Assembly. Do you get the feeling that this trend could see an inflow of more lawmakers as well as other stakeholders join the APC as a result of the perks that may be waiting for them?
Unfortunately, the answer is yes. I use the word unfortunately because as almost all political analysts, political stakeholders, we agree, this trend is not healthy for democracy. Democracy thrives in an environment of competition where people have alternatives. But with the trend continuing like this, it's obvious. At the moment, it has always been that the APC has a control of the National Assembly, but the control keeps growing by the day. The PDP has about 30 or less senators now. I can't remember the figures.
30
yes, 30 as of the last defection. So out of 109, the other smaller party has 1, 2 here and there. So opposition itself, I doubt if there are more than 40 at the moment. So out of 109 or say 106, because some of them were the positions have not been filled now, you have about 60 something. That's already more than 2/3 that is required. So you don't expect. This is a National Assembly that from its inception has been accused of rubber stamping everything that the executive brings forward to it. So if the trend continues, it's unfortunate for the democracy. But I'm a student of history, and it's always, whenever something like this happens, every time in history, it looks as if this is the worst it can ever be. It has never been like this before, but it has always been like this, especially with Fourth Republic. And for those that are older, they could also remember, we read in history, it was the same in the Second Republic, when the NPN controlled majorly and it was doing all it could to get people more. But for the Fourth Republic, you could remember at the point, the PDP controlled as much as 28 states. Right. And even the states that it does not control, there was a time, I think within 2003, towards the 2003 election, the APP, before it metamorphosed to ANPP, the APP governors then, some of them were even described to be more PDP than the PDP governors. What does that mean? That they are APP by day, but in the night, they are with the PDP. So this has been the trend all the time. And why it's like this is the unfortunate situation that we have, the kind of system that we have, which has made a lot of people to be clamoring more for this restructuring. Power is too centralized, is too concentrated at the center. Everybody look up to the center. Even now, that state governors get more. People still expect the federal to be the one bringing all the contracts. So because of that, state governors, most of them, to shy away from their responsibilities, they say, okay, we need to align with the federal so that it can bring contracts for us. What of the money that is accruing to them? What have they been able to do with that? So it's a way of sidestepping accountability. By the time they align with the central, because the central wants to keep itself in power, it pumps projects into those states. So it's an unfortunate situation that we find ourselves. And the only way, I know you said we're going to talk about, is for the opposition to get its house in order, and mount a serious challenge.
Right, just on that particular point, before we segue into another layer of the conversation, speaking of what this translates to against the backdrop of 2027, what is your understanding about what this could actually mean? I mean, it's one thing for political figures to decamp and join a ruling party or any other political party for that matter. It's another thing on election day for that defection to actually count in terms of votes, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the voters that get to decide. Yes, some of these figures may hold some sort of influence on voters, but are we heading to a place where it's almost inevitable that the APC is going to become too big to fail on election day?
Yeah, I think there was a coach, I can't remember the Nigerian leader, but he's among the current crop of leaders, that said voters don't determine election. The people, the masses don't determine the outcome of the election. The key stakeholders, those are the people that determine the election. And the person argued further because it sounds very ridiculous to say when you say voters don't determine. But the argument there was that the average masses, average Nigerian, is encumbered with a lot of things. Poverty has stricken, people are looking only for how to survive day by day. Each family, each person has one person they look up to. That person they look up to probably look up to a councillor. The councillor look up to a chairman. Chairman to governor or senator. That is the chain. That is why you notice that in the trend of for the Fourth Republic, for at least the ones that we are more familiar with, to get electoral result is about state control. Where the party, states where the party, for instance, if the ruling party controls a state, the chances of the ruling party losing federal election in those states are slim. It's not that there are no exceptions. Even in the last election,
yeah, I mean,
we had several exceptions.
I was about to point out, the last election, the FCT, Lagos, for instance, a big state that, has, hundreds of thousands of votes, if not millions of votes, up for grabs, right? Kano, for instance, Kaduna, for instance, and all the other swing states, so to say. Isn't it fair to say that trajectory is changing, where you could have the biggest political figure in a community or in a state, and the voters could, turn the tide of the election?
Like I said, there are exceptions. 2023 is one of those exceptions, but I do argue, and I beg to differ if anybody thinks otherwise. I feel the momentum we had in 2023 election were as a result of the 2020 NSAS protest. There was a crop of youth that were disenchanted with the system. That, I always have the belief that the current obedient movement that we see came as a result of the NSAS movement. This is how do I put it? It is a group that metamorphosed organically as a result of yearnings of youth. So with that, there was an exception for the 2023 election. That's why
Do you think the momentum is not there anymore?
The momentum is dwindling. And why do I say this? There is, after the 2023 election, which some have argued was still one of the best, like I said, some argued. After that election, which a lot of people believe that did not meet expectation, the hopes in some of the youth have been waned. And the confidence in the electoral umpire has gotten to a certain level that people just assume that it doesn't matter what we do, it will not get there. And secondly, structurally, what we see is that at least for the 2023 elections, the opposition parties were not as fragmented as what we have now. The obedient movement, were able to latch on an established party like the Labour Party. Labour Party might probably have not won that much at the national level, but it has produced a governor before. It has produced members of House of Assemblies, Federal Assembly before. So they were able to jump on a party that already has structures, at least across the country. So, but with what is happening in the country at the moment, I'm not ruling out is not an hopeless situation, but the hope is dwindling every day. That's why I said earlier, except the oppositions are able to mend their fences, it's going to be an easy run for the APC. And this defection, if I may add, this defection is just making the process smoother. If you see you saw what happened in Northwest at the weekend, the APC leaders all came together and said there is not going to be another candidate for the party. They are endorsing President Tinubu. Today, in the statement released by the State House, the Minister of Works, Dave Umahi, said in that documentary that all 5 state governors in Southeast will be supporting Tinubu in 2027. Don't forget, few weeks ago, Governor of Anambra State, who is Abga,
says Abga
has adopted Tinubu.
Right.
The governor of Abia State has never really criticized Tinubu. Of course, he's a Labour Party man. He's working with Peter Obi to work on this thing. But in his interview that I saw recently, he was not critical of any of the economic policies of this government.
You're saying that the body language or the political figures that actually matter in the grand scheme of things is suggestive that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu may face little resistance.
Yes, it's a strategy. This is not happening per chance. This is a grand scheme that was planned and is being executed in phases.
Right.
I believe, and as a lot of people believe, the first phase was the dismantling of the structures of the opposition party. Now we're in the next phase,
right,
with the defection and the endorsements.
All right. Wonder what the next step would be. Obviously, consolidation of some of these developments that we've seen so far. Let's talk about some of the events that is shaping the conversation on the other side of the aisle.
Yes.
We understand, I mean, the Punch reported earlier in the week that an offer was made to Peter Obi to be the running mate of Atiku in a one-term deal. We now understand that both parties are saying that never happened. But this is not the first time we're hearing about it. What is the temperature like with the talks of the coalition? Because the Senate caucus, the PDP's caucus in the National Assembly just came out and said, listen, no coalition that is going to, happen should be led by any other person other than leadership of the PDP. What is your reading into this back and forth?
I think Nigerians are excited about the coalition. And what do I mean by this? The excitement is giving rooms to several speculations. Since March 20 or so, when former Vice President Atiku Abubakar announced the formation of the coalition, everyone, even from the 2023 election results, everyone already understood that for President Tinubu and APC to be given a run for their money in 2027, there must be a coalition. There is no other way about it. So when that announcement was made on March 20, people were excited. Then, few days before then, the former governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, defected from APC to SDP. The momentum were rising. But two months down the line, nothing has come of it. So it's natural for people.
Is it because it's too early?
No, it's not too early and it's not too late. But for a while, some have argued that the coalition talk is early. And the reason why they said it's early is that you give enough room for the ruling party to
poach and destabilize.
Right. But personally, what I feel was too early was the announcement. What could have been done is the background work that they are doing now that people are not aware of. This background work, this behind-the-scenes talks should have continued till late 2025 or early 2026 when the announcement will be made and there will be mass defection into a party that they have agreed on.
We now hear that there could be two alternatives or more.
Yes.
Earlier on, following the defection of Nasir El-Rufai to the SDP, we thought SDP is going to be the destination. Now we understand that ADC is on the table now. How realistic are some of these speculations?
See, the situation is that the coalition seems to have boxed itself into a corner. Like I said earlier with the early announcement, I think it was a bit rushed. The idea of coalition is not rushed. Don't get me wrong. The idea of coalition is something that should start even from the day the results were announced. There's no point wasting time. Leaders can start meeting each other. But when you announce, you already show your hands to the ruling party. And when that was done, SDP that is being figured as the party that is going to carry that is going to be the vehicle for the coalition. Don't forget they have members that were elected. The party has a structure on ground. And part of the strategy of politics is the ruling party reaching out to destabilize whatever they are planning. Elections are not won only by winning. You can win election by making sure your opponent lose, or by making sure your opponent does not rally itself together campaign, right, to be able to do this. So that is what happened. The SDP, from what we've been gathering from the information that has been filtering around, does not seem to have been able to reach a consensus with the leaders of the coalition. I think the leadership of the SDP, from some of the conversation I had with some of their leaders, they have issues with some personalities in the coalition.
And are those reservations informed by a lack of alignment, or do you think, like some suggested, because the SDP looks like a spare vehicle for the Tinubu campaign?
Well, the allegation has not been, it has been debunked, but it has not been totally trashed that SDP is an alternative for the Tinubu presidency. because we saw what happened in 2022, there were already talks that if he didn't get the ticket of APC, he was going to get the ticket of SDP. So a lot of people assume that with that already on ground in 2022, he probably had his men planted as executives in this party. So, like I said, the conversation we've been having with some of the leaders of the SDP suggests that some persons in the party were not comfortable with the idea. And those people are influential. And there is the fear that, you know, everything is about survival. There's the fear that if the coalition leaders come into the party, as we've seen with National Rufai, there are already allegations that he's trying to take over the control of the party. Once you lose the structure, once you lose the control of the party, you have no stake in the conversation. It's game over. So I think that's where the coalition is now. There is no positive response yet from SDP. So I believe that's where they are considering other alternatives. ADC has been mentioned. Other parties are also being mentioned. Nothing, as of today, nothing has been concretely concluded. Conversations are ongoing from the conversations I've had with people that are familiar with this development. Conversations are ongoing. But the real issue is still not on the party, but is on agreement on position sharing. That was why the Punch report yesterday, we saw it was debunked, because it's a very, very technical and a very, very dicey situation of what will happen. Will Atiku run? If Atiku runs, will he run as a vice presidential candidate or will he run as presidential candidate? What will happen to National Rufai? What will happen to Peter Obi? What will happen to other leaders that are part of this? So I think that's where the coalition is at the moment. The talks are engineered towards ensuring that, first, like when we spoke with Paul Ibe, the media advisor to Atiku Abubakar yesterday, he said at the moment where they are is to get a viable platform. When you have the platform, you can now bring other people in and say, okay, let's talk about sharing this position.
As we always say in Nigeria, there is no smoke without fire, or no fire without smoke, whichever the case may be. Well, interesting times definitely ahead. But Nigerian politics always serves as good drama and, of course, high stakes developments. Clement, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you very much for the analysis. All right.